Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Rough Riders, where every week, or it was every week, and then I took an unexpected break from this for a while. But the intention is to every week to talk writing, self-publishing, and making it as an author. And this week, I am joined by Andrew Bryan, who is author of the indie novel Archangel's Fall, which when I was doing my research for this interview, I was very excited to be able to talk about this one because this sounds like it's right up my alley. So I'm very excited to have Andrew here. So yeah, thank you, Andrew, for being with me. I know we had been planning
Thank
on this
you for
for a
having me.
while, but the time difference made it really tough. Like I thought it was hard enough just trying to
Yeah,
organize a meeting with someone on the East Coast, which is only like
yeah,
a 3 hour difference, but you are in the Netherlands. So
yeah.
this has
I'm
been.
okay, so it's even. I just keep moving around just to
Oh,
keep
okay,
things
yeah,
in.
you're a little transient and you're just
Yeah.
going all over the place. You're nomadic. So
Yeah.
so let's start with just talking about you. You have a really interesting background, and there were actually
Mm.
some things that somehow I did not notice before this until I was reading this morning. I was going through your bio again, and I was like, holy shit, okay.
Yeah.
There's some really cool things that you've done. So yeah, tell us about you.
Yeah. So, well, the reason why I transitioned to being an author was because for most of my adult life, was an actor. And of course, alongside that, you have to be barman, fitness trainer, general. I'll do any job to just work between acting jobs, which is a lot of time. So I was kind of working in London for about 10 to 15 years, working all sorts of jobs, hitting audition rooms. And I ended up doing quite a few commercials and TV bits and pieces. I was kind of stuck at the two episode character. So I was always like large and in charge. I was either the enforcer on the police end of the spectrum or on the kind of the bad guy end. And yeah, I had a lot of great experiences, but I just got really frustrated that I couldn't tell my own story and couldn't control my work. So as an actor, you're beholden to the casting directors, to getting auditions, to even getting in the room. And I was just like, I can't handle this. I like to work
Mhm.
and I want to be busy, and sitting around, even in these cast rooms and even sitting around on set when you're not even due to go on, it's so boring. And I was like, I
Mhm.
want to be busy. So then I was like, okay, I'm a storyteller. How do I do this without all the frills of actually, you know, being on set, shooting a film, having to spend like 10 grand or more to make even a short film? I was like, well, I can just write it and release novels. So that's how I got to that point. But before that, I did a divinity degree and I went to acting school. So I was very much always interested in angel mythology, mythology around religion, not just Christianity, and as a young into comic books. So essentially where I am now is I've blended this angel mythology, Christian Judaic mythology into a kind of a superhero, spiritual superhero universe that I'm starting in Archangel's Fall. And that's, yeah, basically,
That's I love
yeah.
that. That's so cool. So there's so many things I want to say, and I know that this is supposed to be writing focused, so I'm really trying to fight my temptation to talk mostly
Oh,
about
come
acting
on.
Right now because that's so
Let's talk
interesting to me.
anything. That's
So
fine.
so I never really thought about what you said that being an actor, it's hard enough that you have to kind of work a lot of side jobs to try to make
Yeah.
yourself, give yourself an income while you're not acting. I never really had a lot of contact with people who were in that industry until I moved here to Vegas. And then now
Sure.
that I'm in aesthetics here, a lot of our patients that we see are people in entertainment. So I had
Yeah.
never dealt with that before. In DC, I was dealing with mostly like senators and stuff getting Botox, and now it is actors and stuff. So
Yeah.
actors and porn stars, but
Yeah.
it's
So,
very it's different, but I always knew like, oh yeah, acting must not be an easy path to take when it comes
yeah.
to a career, because half of them work as like waiters and waitresses on the side
Yeah.
here on the West Coast trying to make a living. But I never thought about what you just said, that if you are a creative person and you're in acting, you really don't have a whole lot of control over or creative control over anything. So
No, you're
I
just a
feel like
pawn.
Hmm. Yeah, like if you,
Yeah. So in the
I'm
end of
just
the day,
picturing you like playing a character and thinking, as a creative person, probably thinking like, you know what, like maybe this character should have been like a little bit more like this or a little more like that.
yeah,
But you have no freedom to pursue that at all and try to convey it because you're being told this is how it has to be. So
yeah.
that's, it's
And I
interesting.
think as well as an actor, you have to say the lines that you're given. You know, you can obviously any line can have a totally different subject. So I can say, "I'm going to kill you, man," or I can say, "I'm going to kill you, man." You know,
Mhm.
like they can both mean totally different things. But I think it's a case of, um, where is your passion? Is your passion for the story? Is your passion to tell the story? Or is your passion to just be seen and be a talking head and to be around that and be like, oh, this is, I'm trying, like, no, it's about the story. It's like I want to create story. I don't want to just be a pawn in that. And I'm very much a control freak. All authors are. We're like, control the story. You know, get it
Mhm.
down.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
as an actor, you're very much like, um, you're the will of the casting director and the director. And until you get to a certain level, which is 0.5% of all actors, you're never going to have that producer ability or director ability. And you're also on a ticking clock as well. Whereas an author, you can write books in your 50s, 60s, 70s. You're not going to get on screen if you're 50, you know, and you've started maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago, because you haven't built enough of a rep. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just thought, you know what? I love telling stories. I want to tell. The reason why I went with the Archangel vibe was I was always getting auditions for supernatural characters or kind of, yeah, like celestial being, like automaton or like orcs and things like, you know, like
Yeah.
brutish kind of like heroes or anti-heroes. And I was just like, I got an audition for Gabriel in a series called Dominion, which kind of flopped, but it was a very good. It was kind of a good concept about, you know, Gabriel and Michael and the forces of heaven and all these other angels and everything. But I did. I was down. It was down to me and the last guy, and he got it because he had a little bit more experience, I think. And basically, I was just like, oh, okay, right. I love this character. I'm just going to write a story around this character and other characters, yeah,
Mhm.
and make it interesting.
Well, your background, like your education in like divinity and stuff, must have
Yeah,
been a huge help when it comes
yeah,
to writing something with a like I'm sure it's probably not like exactly literal adaptation of you know, biblical stuff, but you having a knowledge of this sounds like it would make your job a little bit easier when it comes to writing about that subject. Like,
yeah,
you know, I've seen plenty and maybe not read plenty, but I've certainly seen plenty of movies that are,
yeah.
they have like vaguely kind of like Judeo-Christian themes, and you can tell when the people don't really know a whole lot about the source material. It's
Yeah.
more like the
And,
stereotypes that you know
and
about
that is
certain things.
exactly why I just wanted to write this book. I'm like, so I watch Legion, I watch all, you know, all these other sort
Hmm.
of films, 90s and noughties, and Constantine 2's coming out this year, I think. So that might be a good boost for my
Hmm.
genre.
Yes.
But man, you'd watch those and you're just like, this is so Hollywoodized, and it's such a human centric point of view on God. So I mean,
Hmm.
essentially, okay, the Bible is more human centric than other religions like Buddhism or Taoism. It tends to be more, okay, the Trinity, family, everything's based on family. So Lucifer is the brother of Michael and
Hmm.
Gabriel, and then God, the Father, and the Son, and then the Holy Spirit. But that doesn't really track when it comes to imagining a real kind of, I think, a realistic world of what angels and dark angels like be, because
Hmm.
yes, you have familial bonds, of course, but outside of all of that, you know, it's essentially, it's like these characters have existed since the dawn of time. If you're going to back as Genesis does and then kind of bring in other elements from the Dead Sea Scrolls or the book of what is it, the book of I think
I'm
Enoch,
thinking
you know.
Enoch. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
thinking
There's
that.
a lot
Yeah.
of,
Hmm.
and then the Book of Giants. There's a lot of extra canonical books, but especially the Dead Sea Scrolls, because the Dead Sea Scrolls is when all these books were kind of like dug up. And you know,
Hmm.
the Emperor Constantine just decided to put a certain amount of books together because those were the ones that were better for control. And I go into that a little bit in the second book. I'm coming into that now as well. So yes, it's definitely based on Judeo-Christian mythology, but I take more of a cynical spin on the Catholic Church and on the way that it's gone, and the way that the
Hmm.
person of Jesus and all these other kind of characters in the past, which I call them seers,
Hmm.
prophets, if you will, have been manipulated by dark angels to then you to work an agenda to take humanity away from their own godhood, in the sense that, you can't be God, you have to worship Jesus, you're a sinner. That's what they've been fed. Whereas actually, within humankind, it's more of a Buddhist, I
Hmm.
guess, spirituality or ethos behind my narrative, in that every single human being we have today, has a purpose, has a meaning, and has our own creative godliness within us. And now that's not very, that would be blasphemous to very hardline Christians to say that. But I'm afraid, in the end of the day, you know, Christianity tends to put out a very guilt manipulative script, which you've just addressed at the start there. It's like
Hmm.
you said to me before this interview, yeah, I don't know if my Catholic guilt will allow that. It's like that's a big problem for a lot of
Hmm.
people, and I think that you know it's about how do you find your own self-worth side of that, probably quite yeah, jarring upbringing that you didn't necessarily choose. So
Hmm.
how can you choose now as an adult with full knowledge and full freedom to do that? And so there's a lot of questions of certainly the first novel, and it will go into that in the second and third and fourth in the series. Yeah,
That's very cool. It's also very cool to me that because there is, like you said, there is so much. It's probably more obscure to like the average person. It's not really obscure to maybe an
yeah,
academic who
yeah,
studies this, but the like sort of extra biblical material that was present in like Second Temple Judaism, like the
yeah.
Book of Enoch, the Dead Sea Scrolls, all of these things that even in the Bible and in the New Testament they're sort of citing these or alluding to these,
Mm,
assuming that the audience that is reading it already knows this material, but then us as modern
mm.
readers read it and we totally don't pick up on it because we're not familiar with that.
Yeah,
Like
and
Enoch is very like there's so much stuff you can play on with things like
yeah,
that. And like sort of the angel mythology and the hierarchies of angels that they have that is not necessarily in Old or New Testament. Like they don't really go into
yeah.
that too
And I
much,
mean,
but
obviously, as an author, I have creative license. I fill in a lot of the
oh, of
blanks, right?
course.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
Mhm.
creating a lot of, and I was felt very uncomfortable with the. So specifically in my world, like angels and dark angels or demons, I was always very uncomfortable with the idea of the angel of war being a good guy. Okay, so and that's very Old Testament Judaism.
Mhm.
It's all war, right? And then the New Testament kind of picks up, and there's a lot of New Age stuff around like angel cards and your guardian angel Michael. It's like Michael was he's the archangel of war. Like, how
Mhm.
can an archangel of war be good? So very much, yeah, he's a bit of a jaded kind of, yeah, I wouldn't say a baddie, but he's just a jaded warrior who's like, I've
Mhm.
had enough, kind,
Yeah.
and very much with a Thanos complex of like, we need to reset here.
Mhm.
So that essentially I take Michael to be more of the kind of, yeah, the problem that the damned, who is essentially, he's not Satan. I don't give him a name, but the damned is the main character, and it's essentially the devil's redemption story, is what I look at through this
Mhm.
whole series. Which I'm like, why has nobody done this before? Like, why has the devil always been the bad guy, or why has Satan always been like the adversary? Well, maybe he's just, misconstrued or taken from the wrong perspective. And that's what you said there about like people in the Bible the wrong way. I mean, you can read the Bible any way you want because it's so contradictory. And it really depends on what's inside of you that you map onto it. And that's where obviously it can be used to control people and, to get lots of money from lots of American preachers. And,
Oh,
even
yeah.
the Catholic Church
Yeah.
has amassed so much wealth over the years because it's all about money and power and control, and it's not
Mhm.
really about the words and the message of Jesus anymore. And that's why what the Reformation tried to do in the 15th, 16th centuries. But we're back now at a place where it's like, well, okay, now we've got aliens that people believe in, and the gym membership and Instagram, and there's all sorts of different things that people have faith in now. So
Mhm.
um, Yeah, I think there's always something for humankind to cling on to move away from their own ability to be present, good-natured, kind, and look for the best
Hmm.
in each other. And I think any stories that try to provoke people to look deeper, I welcome, and certainly that's what I do in the kind of of my exciting
Hmm.
story. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I when I went on your website,
yeah,
you have a page which I actually haven't seen anyone else that I've interviewed so far do this, and it was a very cool idea to me that I had never really thought about. You have a page on your website that is about like character breakdowns for your novel.
yeah.
So that's
Mhm.
almost like the little kind of snippet that people would write in their own notes for their book about like a little profile for each character. So
Mhm.
while I haven't read your book yet, that's
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
that's the important word. While I haven't read it yet, so I don't know directly, but my
sure.
assumption is that you spend a good deal on developing your characters because I
Yeah,
can't imagine that you would include that on your website if you weren't
yeah.
writing something where your characters were not
100%.
flat. So what I do think is cool is when it comes to angels, maybe not so much about demons, but definitely angels. I think that people have a tendency to look at them as if they don't necessarily have individual personalities. They're almost
Yeah,
sort of like robots that just
marginal. Yeah.
worship God and do his will.
Mm.
So, which clearly can't be true if there are angels that are able to sin and like transgress and then fall. So,
That's the big problem in the Bible. A lot of people. There's one camp that says angels have no free will because that's what man has. So angels have no free
mhm,
will. So if angels have no free will, then they are homogenous. They are robots because they can't choose. But there's I think there's just a limit to their free will. Humankind has so much free will, and humankind has more of an innate ability to commune with God and other humans, where angels are very much stuck in their own realm unless there's a cataclysm, which is what my book addresses
mhm,
essentially. And so if you're talking about in the mythology that's a sort of a biblical centric mythology, it is more the idea that yes, of course, angels have sinned because the Watchers came down and made you've got the Nephilim, the giants that come from, and this is all kind of mythological stuff that's in Enoch, but it's a lot of people expand on that without really doing more than just, oh wow, these things are really cool. And so yeah, what I do is I go really into character breakdowns and descriptions, and I make the characters really fleshed out because as an actor, that's what you're an expert at. You're an expert at
mhm,
two things. You're an expert at dialogue and you're an expert at character because you live the character and you've done all the backstory and you know character types like the back of your hand. So it's just like it's a Rolodex in your head, just like, okay, that one fits with this one. That character wouldn't say that to this character. That character would never want to meet that character. You have this kind of like understanding, having been an actor, of those kind of workings of interrelationships between
mhm.
certain character types, but also dialogue. I mean, that's something that really annoys me a lot when I read a fantasy novel or a novel that tries to be set in a different universe and they talk like they're walking down the street in LA about to get a frappuccino. And you're like, what the hell are you doing, man?
Yes.
Have some imagination and some respect for this genre that you're trying to create. Like anytime, if I'm reading a novel and I see that, I'm like immediately like, I'm sorry anymore. This you don't care. You
Mhm,
haven't. You're just lazy. You haven't thought about this enough. You're just using your own language and mapping it onto a character that is totally alien to the world that you're in. And I
mhm.
find that is one big pitfall of a lot of fantasy books or just
Yeah.
poor books. You
Mhm.
read a book and you're like, this character's voice so not, it doesn't
It's just
say
out of
anything about their,
place. Like it just
yeah, it doesn't
doesn't.
say anything
Yeah.
about their character. And it's just
Mhm,
like, it's grating and jarring. And you're like, oh, okay. So yeah, my story is less about driving a plot. There is a big plot, but it's more about the characters revealing the plot,
mhm,
and a lot of twists and turns coming from that. And I do a lot of offshoots, kind of similar to Marvel films, where you're like, okay, it's a very much an ensemble piece. So you're flipping between different characters, and a lot of people find that annoying and jarring and a bit overwhelming. But personally, I am someone who's easily distracted and likes a lot of information, and I like
mhm.
piecing things together. I'm a bit of a strategy game fanatic, and I'm like, so my book is just like one big strategy Yeah.
hmm I was going to ask you that actually, because this subject has come up with other people. Some people really, really are so opposed to the idea of having a cast of characters that is larger than maybe just a little handful of them, especially
Mhm.
when it comes to point of view. They
Yeah.
want to limit it to a very small number. So my book, I've written two novels. One of them is very limited with the number of characters. There are only two point of view
So,
characters. The other
yeah.
one has quite a few, enough that if I
Yeah.
were to go back and write it again, I probably would have one or two less.
Yeah. Yeah.
But with yours, you since you do focus on characters so much, and just based on what you just said, do you have, in terms of point of view, how is that written? Do you have it from
So,
a good number of perspectives, a fairly limited one? I know Gabriel, I think, is the sort of the main character that you mention, at least in the book
yeah.
description.
So the thing is, this thing of point of view, it's very author speak, and I don't really understand it because people focus too much on point of view, I think,
hmm
because at the end of the day, you can have as many points of view as you want. They make sense and they link together well
hmm
and come in at the right time. So I don't necessarily talk from the character's perspective a lot. So that's what
hmm
POV is. It's the
Yeah.
character's thought, the character thinking. I'm narrator, dialogue, action, and
hmm
occasionally you'll get some POV thoughts or musings. But because I don't play the POV game, then I
hmm
think that's why my book doesn't get into trouble with too many characters, because it's
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
here's the narrator, here's a little bit of dialogue or action. Here's a little bit of point of view. Here's a little bit more dialogue. I don't really go by those sorts of rules. And I think that's because as an actor, when you've read so many film scripts and you're working with scripts, there's no point of view.
hmm
There's no,
It's true. Yeah. Yeah.
there's no,
hmm
so a lot of people have read my book. They say, "Oh yeah, it's like you're watching the movie," and that's why, because there isn't really a point of view. Because unless you're watching Deadpool or you're watching something that has like serious amounts of voiceover, you just
hmm
don't have POV, right?
Yeah.
Films. So I think that's why I find it a bit weird that people get stuck with this whole POV thing. And you'll know if you read it back, right? And your edit, that's what
hmm
your editor's for, right? If you've got something that needs to be more, where there needs more filler to come in to kind of build out the world, you can do that in a number of ways. It doesn't always have to be character thoughts or the point of view. It can be the narrator, it can be the action, it can be the dialogue. And that's the thing.
hmm
A lot of my exposition is done by the characters speaking to one another, but not in a way where they're explaining everything, just where they're
hmm
hinting at things that are happening somewhere else. And then you're like, oh, maybe that's that thing that was happening earlier. And you're
hmm
sort of unfolding it gradually. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I don't particularly like in dialogue when it's like I feel like this is partly why I don't particularly like anime, is because I feel like this happens a lot, but it'll be very, very long quotations by a character that are basically just explaining some concept or event to the reader, but it goes on really long. And I feel
Yeah.
like it never does anything for me. I don't
Yeah.
particularly like that.
And you definitely have to have some exposition in your dialogue, but you keep it sharp to leave the reader being like, oh, what
hmm
is that? And then they're like, oh, right, we're going to find out about that later, I guess, because this
Yeah.
sounds important if the two main characters are talking about this thing that we haven't found out yet.
hmm
But yeah, I think you're right there. It's good. You will have moments where you reveal things through the characters' dialogue, but yeah, less is more,
hmm
always.
I
Yeah.
will ask you this because you mentioned it in passing just before,
Yeah.
about like world building or expanding the universe
Mm.
that you're writing. So, I have never written anything that was from the perspective or really about like supernatural beings. So, any
Mm.
world building that I did was very just kind of, it's the physical world. This is just everyday
Yeah.
life sort
Yeah.
of
Cool.
stuff, like
Mm.
kind of thinking of that. So, I know that in your book that part of the premise is that the ethereal realm is sort of melding with the physical world.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
in terms of setting, is a good
Mm.
amount of it or any of it taking place sort of in the, non-physical spiritual world,
Yeah.
or yeah.
That's something that you can't really do, I think, because the idea of an ethereal world or some kind only playing. It's always you can't really make stuff happen there because it's like the void in Marvel or the
Hmm.
this crazy multiverse they've created. It's like it's not grounded. There's no human relatability in it. So
Hmm.
the etherverse or the ethereal world is never really seen, but you see characters moving through it and how they move through it. And obviously, similar to a lot of films that have been done on the matter, it's like the spiritual world exists alongside the physical realm, but we just can't see it. And those that
Hmm.
can see it are higher beings that have, that are seers that can access it and can commune with angels or affect their movement and affect their, ability to do certain things. So I try not. I probably won't ever go into that ethereal world because it's going to break also the reader's imagination of what that
Hmm.
might be.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I just don't think you can do it well in you know unless you're kind of going to go into kind of different worlds where it's an actual not necessarily a planet but a plane. And maybe I'll do that eventually, but I think for now, certainly for the series that I'm writing, it's all set in the physical world, and anything that's slightly ethereal happening or energetic that's happening, you're seeing it from the perspective of a seer, a being that can
Hmm.
see angels coming to earth, and it's sort of happening alongside the physical world. Yeah.
Hmm. I definitely agree with you that if you were to directly describe the kind of spiritual world in that way, almost as if you were describing like a real world place, that it does sort of take away the mystique of all of it. That, the reader should be thinking about this as sort of I don't want to say abstract, but that's sort of how I think of like the non-physical world,
Yeah.
is that it's so
Yeah,
formless
definitely.
that you can't really pin it down and describe
Yeah,
it
and
in
I think
that
also
way.
that pays more homage to the idea that like how can we conceive of a spiritual if you're someone who believes in a higher power?
Hmm.
I mean, it's like how can you conceive of some and everything that's been created? Like you can't. It's very difficult to do, and
Hmm.
yeah, Marvel and other films and other books I think have tried it, but 9 times out of 10 that's going to fail, and also it's just not really relatable, so it's wasted words, I think, for the story you want to kind of come back to that's actually relatable to these great characters you created or the human characters that are alongside them. It very much didn't wanted it to be a balance of human and supernatural characters because as much as we all love superheroes and would love to be them, we are human, we have our flaws, and we need to see those human dramas played out alongside these
Hmm.
other things, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. So
Mm.
is your book going to be, is this kind of a standalone one, or are you planning on
No.
having additional ones in that universe you've created?
Yeah, no, I'm writing book two at the minute. I'm about halfway through
Cool.
book two. Book three and four will be coming eventually. And once I've finished the series, I will do the audiobook for all four myself, just because, well, I'm an
I was
actor. I've
gonna
done it.
say you have an advantage there. I wish that I could say that.
It takes no extra effort for me to do that. I mean, it'll take a lot of time, and you still have to spend a good amount of money. But I at least know that I will be reading it, and
Mhm.
and I think it's a good thing to do for any author to do audiobooks because it's a growing market because a lot of people just don't have the time to read because they want to multitask, right? Maybe they want to take the kids to school or do the laundry or wash the
Mhm.
dishes, cook the dinner, and they can grab a bit of time in their audiobook. You can't do that, with while you're reading, and it also takes more brain power, I think, to read. It takes a little bit less to just listen.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah,
so I
I've
think
been
audio.
thinking about that a lot lately, actually,
Yeah, I think it's a
because
good
it's
strategy
come up a lot in
if you like
these
to do it. Yeah,
interviews. Yeah, and
yeah.
then I've become the person at this point that I have no time to read anything. I barely have time to write anything at this point
Yeah,
because I have so much focus on like my just regular job and career
yeah,
right
yeah,
now that I don't have a lot of time. So really, the only chance I would ever have to even read anything in a way, would be to just listen to it in the car on
yeah,
the way to work. So I'm seeing the appeal of audiobooks more than I used to, just now
yeah.
that I'm in a situation where I'm like, okay, I understand now why people would do that. So it's very cool that you're going to be down the line doing an audiobook adaptation of that, and I would love to listen
Definitely.
to it on the way to
Yeah,
my
for sure.
job when I'm stuck in Vegas traffic for an hour. So that would be really cool. So,
Yeah.
so I will. I'm going to ask you one more question before we
Sure.
wrap it up because I ask
Sounds
everyone
good.
this since we're talking about writing a series. How long? Because some people are very fast writers, some people are very slow writers like me.
Mhm.
Are how long did it take you to write Archangel's Fall, roughly?
So it started as three films. I wrote three film scripts, and I was
Oh, that's
like,
so
oh
cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I turned the first film into an 8 episode series. So originally the concept was Lightbearer. So the Lightbearer is the name of the series now, not the name of the
Hmm.
book. So Archangel's Fall is the name of the first book, but
Hmm.
Lightbearer is the overall series in book form. But essentially, the pilot episode of Lightbearer, the series as written by me for TV, is essentially the first third of the book.
Hmm.
So I mean, I've expanded it so much after that, but it's taken me about 7 years to get this point where I've finished the novel.
Hmm.
But I basically chopped out the whole of like the first 4 or 5 episodes of the series, and then I put it all into a Google Doc, and then I just transcribed it and switched it from script format to long form narrative to
Hmm.
novel at a time. But now that I'm writing the second one and I'm kind of just writing and I don't have as much sort of changing of formats to do, um, I'm going to be a book a year guy because I don't want to dilute quality. I'm just
Hmm.
not. I want to have a life. I want to have holidays, like with
Yes.
my partner. I have a part time job working in a restaurant, and I won't enjoy it anymore if I slam myself into trying to do 2 books a year. Because also, if and when you read my book, Joey, there is a lot of philosophy underneath the narrative that it's you know it's not pushing it down your neck, but it's something like if you watch an M Night Shyamalan film, it's that kind of style of like
Yeah.
this is a great movie, but there's a lot of these messages are kind of parallel with a lot of different things going on, and it kind of makes you wonder. Okay, that's interesting. So but also I'm not one of these writers who's like forcing the message down your
Hmm.
throat. So it's
Yeah.
like take from it what you will, and if you just enjoy it as a story, great. If you find some little pockets of wisdom in there that you enjoy, fine. If you just laugh your head off and you like the comedy in it, and that's it, great too. Art's subjective.
Hmm.
I want people to read it and enjoy it. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you go for like philosophical but not preachy, which
Yeah,
is, I
I mean,
think, a good thing. Yeah.
yeah, just sort of like if you almost if you think of a daily devotional book that's not like got messages on stoicism or
Hmm.
Buddhism or quotes from famous people in the past, and you read these famous quotes, you think, yeah, that's good. I agree with
Hmm.
that's right. There's
Yeah.
some little bits of those dropped into some of the characters' words and and some of the narrative, but it's definitely interspersed with action, a lot of comedy and a lot of kind of epic moments where you're like, okay, this is definitely not just about like a kind of a philosophical tirade. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, sounds badass to me. And I'm
Oh,
definitely going to check this out. And especially if, I mean, I'm sure it'll be a little while, but if there's ever an
yeah,
audiobook and
yeah,
the timing's right,
definitely.
I think I may end up using that as my, book to listen to on the way to
Sure, sure.
work.
Yeah, it
So,
will probably take about 4 years, but
mhm.
when I get that audiobook going, I will send you the file. You can listen to
Yeah,
it.
I would love that. It takes me about 4 years just to get to the next video that I'm doing for this YouTube channel at this point, so the timing will be
Doing great,
perfect.
man.
So,
Doing great.
so yeah, thank you so much for being here. This was
Cheers.
cool, and that's just a book that has a lot of subject matter that I find interesting. So I feel like if I had given us a little more time, I could have certainly talked more about
Yeah, it's great, man. I've really
certain
enjoyed it.
things with
Thank
that.
you.
But yeah, so everyone, I'm going to be checking out Andrew's book. It's called Archangel's Fall. So I strongly recommend that you go do that as well and go follow him on social media because he has really good
Thank you.
content and he has a really cool background. So if you've ever watched Game of Thrones, I can't believe I didn't mention this before, but he was on that show, which is the coolest thing to me. So go check out Andrew's social media, go check out his website, and then most importantly, go check out his novel, Archangel's Fall.
Thank
So
you, Graham.
everyone,
Thank you.
thank you for being here. So everyone, I want to say stay tuned for next week's episode, but I have no guarantee that it's even going to be next week. So I'm just going to say stay tuned. I have so many people I have to get back to. I feel really guilty about that. Like we were talking about Catholic guilt. There it is. So, Italian Catholics Unite. So until next time, thank you so much for your support, everyone, and God bless you all.
Thank you.